I consider myself Palestinian American.
Okay. So I'll give you this point, okay? And this is very irritating because a lot of Zionists will bring up the Holocaust over and over and over and over again for why so many Jews are trying to escape to Palestine, blah, blah, blah. That comes way the later. I don't want to say it's inconsequential, but that has almost nothing to do with the initial flights of Jewish immigrants that were going to...
100%. No war happens. Israel clearly wins. Done. We are where we are now. I think you're showing it on your screen where we kind of landed to. As a Palestinian, I acknowledge that.
It looks like Netanyahu has given the go-ahead on a hostage agreement, the leader of Hamas, in Qatar. The deal involves...
Oh, and I'm debating some guy's mom today. Can I ask you this? Do you think there can be peaceful, resolutions to issues if Hamas remains in charge of the Gaza Strip? Oh, and I'm debating some guy's mom today. Hi, what's up?
I think I guess want to start with understanding what we disagree on.
Okay.
Because we may just be on things.
Sure.
So I've seen you, and correct me if I'm
wait, hold on. Your thing just cut off for a second. You said I've seen you.
Sorry. Hold on.
You're good. It just didn't pick up that one word. Yeah, I can hear everything. There was one word at the end of your sentence that got cut off. I don't know why.
Got it. Okay. So I've heard you say, or you've claimed to be pro-Israeli. I could be wrong. But what does pro-Israeli or pro-Israel mean to you? And what does pro-Palestinian mean to you? I think that's another question.
Oh, I don't know if I'd truly say. It depends on what everybody else's position is what it feels like mine lean towards. So in this environment where everybody's saying they want a one-state solution, that feels like I'm pro-Israel to say a two-state solution. My position on everything is I think that two states should be carved out that have hopefully roughly the 67 borders. Since some Israeli people are so cucked on the settlements, maybe you can do land swaps or some shit to make it equal so you don't have to completely demolish every settlement. I personally, it might not be politically tenable. I think every single settlement of the West Bank should be demolished, but some people would argue that a couple of them are so huge and so established. I think the one near Hebron, and there might be one other. It's and then the Green Line ones that maybe those need to stay. If you want to do that, fine, but there has to be big compensation offered for that. So roughly two-state solution with a lot of what was at the Tapa Summit. We can go to those if you want. And then a two-state solution, probably demolishing of the West Bank settlements. I think it's broadly speaking my position that I would advocate for. Yeah.
Okay, great. So you're pro-Palestinian.
Sure, if you want to. I don't think that's what the Palestinians want, but sure.
Okay, that's a different conversation. But I'm pretty much aligned with everything you said. I don't think there's been a single proposal to dismantle all the settlements by Israel. That's never been proposed. So
no, although a lot of them, I think under Camp David and onwards, there were generous offers to demolish a lot of them, except for the really big ones. But
Destiny.
Yeah.
I want us to be careful on. So when you say generous offers, we agree that the settlements are illegal.
Sorry, let me rephrase that. When I say generous offers, what I mean is more than I would have expected, I think. But you could argue that any settlements left up would be by definition not generous. That's a fair statement to make sure.
Okay, great. I guess my point it's more about these offers that have been made. It's about how much the Palestinians are willing to concede based off of what you've just mentioned. And I think it's fair to trade land swaps, right? I think if there's large settlement blocks near East Jerusalem that contain 30% of the land has 80% of the settlers, then I think if there's a just swap, maybe even a little bit more on the Palestinian side, since Israel kind of took it by force. I think that's fair, even if it's a 1-to-1. I think you were just going through the John Kerry parameters that pretty much outlines exactly that.
Yeah, the Kerry parameters, these look way more reasonable than I thought they would. These look really good. Or I'm not saying I think they'd be unreasonable, but yeah.
For the argument of the right of refugee, we can argue that. I think 242 pretty much outlines that there needs to be some just resolution. It doesn't exactly call for the return of every single refugee to Israel proper.
Isn't that how 242 is normally read, or am I incorrect on that?
There's different interpretations, but it kind of calls out there needs to be a just resolution to the refugee problem, which Kerry kind of addresses in those points, right? Some compensation. I think there should be some some refugees that are allowed to actually return, maybe a small number, kind of like a symbolic reason to appease the Palestinian side, whether it's like 50,000 to 100,000, whatever. Nothing that would change the character of the state.
Oh yeah, that was part of the Camp David Accords too. I think was 100,000 allowed back, and then a $30 billion international fund. Yeah, that's Camp David is the one that I read a lot of for the last one. So this might have been included.
I think Kaba is.
Yeah.
Might
have included that. It might have been included in the Geneva Accord later. It might have been included in other things too. But yeah, that's the last one I'm super familiar with. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, and I'm not sure when Taba was. Do you know? I think it's like 2000, like early 2000s, right? Like
Taba was like months after Camp David Accords, I believe.
Okay, so very early. So realistically, in the last 2 decades, there hasn't been any serious proposal by the Israeli side. You would agree with that, right?
I need to become more familiar with that. There was one in, wasn't there a semi-serious one or a pretty serious one in 2008 by, I don't believe Netanyahu was the prime minister then, was he? Prime minister history. Oh, Ehud Olmert.
Ehud Barak. Or no?
No, not Barak. I don't think he was prime minister. Ehud Olmert. I would have to see, but I've only heard that said that there was a proposal in 2008. I haven't seen what this proposal actually is, so I can't comment strongly on it unless you're familiar with it.
I am not, if I'm being honest.
Okay, this is the last one that I hear referenced for a decently strong proposal, but I don't know what happened.
Sure. So essentially the last 15 years, no real proposal. I think it's fair to say. I think.
Wait, let me open my door real quick. 1 second.
Sure.
What are you looking for?
Like a lighter version of this.
I don't know what that means.
I know what it means.
Version of your exact jacket or coat. Jesus. Okay, sorry.
Yeah, so you were talking about
that this 2008 peace proposal, and then you were making the point that in the past 15 years, Israel hasn't offered a serious peace proposal. Yeah.
Yeah. Not that I know, at least. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And the carry parameters, like Israel just straight up said, no, this is an attack on our democracy. Like we're the only democratic state, blah blah blah, which is kind of like telling of that current government.
A little bit, yeah. Although I would have to see what this follows, because in 2008, is that when we're coming off the, is it the first really big Gaza war?
So there was one in 2008. I don't know how big it was, but I feel like every single Gaza conflict since 2005, there is a debate to be had on why it started.
Sure.
And Israel has used, like, I know for one of them, I don't know, this might be the 2014 one, there was 3 Israelis that were kidnapped and killed, and that was kind of the justification to start the onslaught on Gaza. And I feel like the proportionality of some of Israel's excuses to, like, start bombing Gaza is a little ridiculous. This most recent one, I think, is probably the most understandable one, but any before that, if you look at the causation, it's a stretch for a military power to just go in and start bombing away. And I think we're going to eventually have to get into the, like, how we define human shield, etc.
Okay.
I've seen a little bit. So to be honest, I haven't watched a lot of the stuff that you've researched. So if I'm misrepresenting what you've said or thought, just let me know.
Yeah, I think in the next week I need to stop jerking off on stream so much. I might just do the most recent 20 years because all of my history from 2004 onwards is pretty kind of like contemporary, like based in news articles and skimmings. My deep history or understanding is going to be from 2000 to like 1880, I guess, or really from 48 onwards. So there might be important stuff in the last 15 years that has eluded me so far. So that is completely possible. I might just go through. I think there's been like 6 major Gaza-Israel conflicts. Maybe it's worth going through each one of those, but
and I know you at least from what I've seen on Twitter, you don't really like Finkelstein, and you feel like he kind of is subjective in how he, I guess, presents his. I mean, the facts are the facts, but the story he, I guess, creates around those facts can be misleading from what I've seen.
Yeah, Finkelstein is at this point somebody I would never trust anything that I read from him. I wouldn't trust the citations, and I wouldn't trust his opinion. I tried to reread. He sent me an updated version of his book, for instance, over the flotilla incident, and then I had a friend telling me, "Oh, you should read his updated chapters." But I noticed that he narrativizes and he argues against things with, like, I would say, quote unquote, common sense. Like Let me give an example.
Sure.
Wait, what's your educational background? Just so I have an understanding.
I have. So I guess I could just introduce myself in general for
Yeah,
your
sure.
audience. So I mean, you guys can all do your research on your own. I consider myself Palestinian American.
Okay.
I know you don't like hyphens. Both of my parents were born in Hawata. They were forced to flee in 1967 to Jordan, where I was born. Eventually found our way to America. So obviously some of the things I'm going to say may come off as biased. So I recommend everyone just go do your own research and,
Gotcha. When you say Harada, where is that? Which part of which West Bank or?
It's close to Nablus. So
Okay.
it's the one that you had looked up on stream yesterday where the rampage happened in February, the HUWARA.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
It's comprised of 50% Area C, 50% Area B. My family owns land in Hawata, but they're not allowed to build on it technically because it's under Area C.
Yeah.
If they are to build on it, it will get demolished. So instead, we're building like a park there. So there's like nothing really to get demolished.
Okay.
But yeah, that's my background.
Yeah.
Again,
I was just asking educacationally. Do you have like any? I'm a college dropout, so I was just curious.
Your science degree. I've researched this topic mainly because you're told about it as a child your entire life as a Palestinian, right?
Sure.
My dad would sit me down every day, draw me the map, show me every single village where it all is. So it's like kind of been embroidered into my brain.
Okay.
And then when I got into college, I started looking into the topic more frequently.
Okay. Sorry, I was the only reason I was asking educational background because it might influence like the examples that I use. I wasn't trying to like figure out like have you actually researched that? That was the only reson I was asking. Sorry, I wasn't trying to like impede your knowledge. Yeah, I have no idea. Okay, sorry. Backing up, my issue with Finkelstein is I'll just use the law school example anyway. I'm pretty sure that in law school, if you're asked to argue in favor or against, like let's say that you're a second year law student and you're like, okay, you've got to manage this case, you need to make these arguments, blah 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 blah. You would never, when you're writing these briefs, or you would never, as a lawyer, you would never say something like, my client. When they did this thing and this cop did this thing, I don't think my client should be in trouble because that's obviously wrong, right? What you would say is, you would say, here are 2 or 3 prior cases with a similar or identical set of circumstances, and in these prior cases, here's how the judges or juries ruled, right? And because of these rulings, this is why I would say this is incorrect, right? That's the argument you make. It's like citation of prior cases is a really big part of a lot of these arguments. But I noticed that when Finkelstein, and I can even open these books so we can read some of this later, when Finkelstein argues, he'll say, Israel said that their people were under attack, but obviously that's not true because it wouldn't make sense for that to happen. Like these are a lot of the arguments that he puts in his book. They're kind of comical. Like I would expect him to be like counter-sourcing or counter-citing somebody else, but it's not. It's usually just him like he'll read it and be like, well, I think this is stupid. That's my big issue with.
Can you tell me which books you're referencing exactly?
Yeah, give me 1 second.
So I can. So I've been following Finkelstein for probably over 10 years now, and he's definitely become more aggressive and less patient with explaining the situation properly in more recent books, in my opinion. Just as he's vehemently against anybody who asks for a one-state solution, he thinks that they're just genocidal maniacs for the most part. So it's not like he's just like, Israel bad, Israel needs to be destroyed. He's never been on that side. He's very, very hard on the two-state solution, and he believes that anyone that argues for one state on the Palestinian side is just brain dead because you're just kind of, international law is not on your side. The world consensus is not on your side. So there's no point to even argue for that. Whether or not you believe the founding of the country of Israel is just, I think it's obviously unjust. I've changed my opinions on this as I've grown up, and I've tried to do as much research as I can on Jewish persecution throughout the world and their need for a homeland. I've always thought that Europe was that place since they were the main perpetrators of those onslaughts, but you could convince me otherwise. I don't think we should be using any biblical or religious claims to any parcel of land or any argument on both sides.
Sure. The book that I was referring to, by the way, was the newer one that he gave me was called An Inquest, or it's Gaza, An Inquest into Its Martyrdom.
It's a martyrdom. Yeah. Okay.
Are you familiar with this book? Or have you heard of it at least?
I've heard of the Gaza, the Inquest into Martyrdom. I think he released that in 2014 after the biggest, like one of the biggest onslaughts into Gaza. It was like the 50-some day ground invasion that had happened around that time. Did you read the full book? I haven't finished. I've read
there were 3 chapters that I read. It was like Murder on the High Seas. It was the I don't remember the names of these 3 chapters. The pages that he gave me was like 130 to like 170 or something. But it was he'd written 3 chapters relating to the flotilla incident, basically.
Got it. I mean, to be honest, I'm like less interested in arguing the flotilla. It's just like a small piece.
Oh, sure. I'm not even bringing this up to like argue this particular thing. It was just when I was reading this, it was interesting to me that the way that he would refute arguments it just doesn't seem like something that I would read like this is like an academic refuting this. It's just him saying like, well, obviously this is stupid. That's what it feels like most of his refutations are.
Sure. I would argue, though, you could be right on that. I would argue any quantitative data he's provided or any policy or anything where he's like something clearly defined is pretty factual. Now, you can argue that he's cherry picking and not giving you the full picture, which is fine, but I don't think there's anything we can point to and say, okay, this is factually incorrect. He's just narrating it in a way that sounds worse than it is. Like,
I would argue some parts. For instance, him just saying that there were shots on the deck before that for the flotilla incident specifically. The fact that he was saying that the soldiers were shooting live ammunition before they got to the deck, that's a disputed fact, and he presents it as though it's like just obviously true. So he does do that quite a bit, but.
Okay, I'd have to look into the sources that are disputing it, whether they're like IDF sources, whether they're like human rights.
Well, the
sources,
source is the leader, the organizer of the flotilla, literally said that IDF soldiers didn't shoot until they were attacked when they came down on the deck. But
okay, fair enough.
But also take into everything I'm saying. You can also do your own research on everything. I think is fine. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, Finkelstein aside, there's others, right? There's Christopher Hitchens, there's Edward Said, there's Noam Chomsky, there's other scholars that have written on this topic.
Hitchens and Chomsky I don't think are 2 people I would consider credentialed enough to care that much. Maybe they've ventured something interesting here, but like Chomsky has written about all sorts of fucking things. Like even in Manufacturing Consent, he's writing about like South America and U.S. intervention there and shit. So I know he's got opinions on everything, but I don't know if they're like deeply researched positions or they're just like a byproduct of his political philosophy, right? And again, I could be wrong. Maybe Chomsky or Hitchens, maybe these are noted academics in these fields. But
I know Chomsky has written a few books on it, as has Edward Said, who, but I mean, regardless, just stepping back a little bit from all these guys.
Yeah, that's fine.
I want to, if it's okay with you, maybe spend the next 1 to 2 minutes me just summarizing this conflict from start to finish, starting in the late 1880s. Obviously, I'm going to like keep a lot of things out, and if there's anything that you think I'm misconstruing, let me know.
Sure.
But the way I see this in the 1880s is when the first Aliyah started. I believe that's how you call it. I apologize if it's incorrect, but it started, and then in, I believe, 1905, when Theodor Herzl had proposed a temporary homeland for the Jews, primarily in Russia, to go to Uganda to create a state. It was later then changed. There was some opposition within the Zionist party saying, like, no, let's not do this. And then they finally settled on the Balfour Declaration and moved to, as we know, Palestine. And there was obviously some resistance towards that. I would argue the resistance wasn't so much of the immigration, more so the, I guess, desire to create a state on this land, right? I think that was the main opposition, but also obviously mass migration from Europeans who rightfully were trying to get away from like some pretty shitty circumstances.
Sure. Although I will say, I'll give you this point, okay? And this is very irritating because a lot of Zionists will bring up the Holocaust over and over and over and over again for why so many Jews are trying to escape to Palestine, blah, blah, blah. That comes way the later. I don't want to say it's inconsequential, but that has almost nothing to do with the initial flights of Jewish immigrants that were going to
100%.
Palestine. Yeah. So when they bring up the Holocaust stuff, it was a huge reinforcer where like the Jewish people are like, okay, well, look, we told you so. Yeah, they're absolutely around that. Yeah. But to pretend that like the Holocaust is the reason why they all went to Palestine and started moving there and finding it is absolutely not true. Huge swaths of land were being purchased as early as I believe the 1920s. So the idea that like the Holocaust is the big driver there is that's a Zionist myth. That's bullshit. But go ahead.
Yeah, and then you hear of the first kind of partition plan, I believe the Peel Commission. So the way I look at the first two, the Peel Commission, the 1947 partition plan, both, I don't think you can argue for, I guess you can't make the case for Palestinians accepting that deal. I feel like it's kind of stupid to expect anyone to take that deal in those circumstances, right? We've been living on this land for a very long time. Why the hell would we want to split this up? The map looked disgusting, and demographically it made no sense either. It's not like they were giving the percentage to, I think it was like 30% of the Jewish population as of 1947. We're getting 56% of the land. I don't think it made any sense. And there's obviously some arguments. Benny Morris actually writes about this a lot, and he does a good job of it, I believe, describing how the chief, I guess, opposition of the Arabs was them being afraid of expulsion and being afraid of this Jewish nation kind of forcing them out of their lands or whatever. And land seems something really stupid to fight about in the West to us, but we have to understand in the Middle East this is like so valuable. Like this is like your family's been there for centuries and centuries, and I hear the argument all the time. Well, Jews have been there for 3,000 years. Sure. There's definitely been Jewish presence. I don't think anybody argues that. But
wait. Hold on, wait. Your shit just lagged for a second. Okay, wait. Are you okay?
Sorry, yeah.
Wait, no.
You hear me?
Hold on. Yeah, I did, but it was like blipping and lagging a bit.
So yeah, long story short, just to kind of call all that stuff up. 1947 partition plan, Arabs rightfully rejected. No shit. War happens. Israel clearly wins. Done. We are where we are now. I think you're showing on your screen where we kind of landed to. Okay, I'm like, as a Palestinian, I acknowledge that.
Sure.
Countless
I think
countries
that
have been conquested by others.
Yeah. I think that I would probably say, so I've given this explanation in the past, although it's unsatisfying to a lot of people, that there are times where I feel like you can have proper justification for like fighting on both sides. Like if in 1967, if all the surrounding Arab states would have won the war and expelled the majority of the Jewish people from, historic Palestine, and ethnically cleanse whatever, most of them leave, or some of them stay and they become part of like some Palestinian state or a unified Arab state, I don't think I would have a huge problem with that. Like I think I can understand that, right? At least up to 1967. It's like, because obviously you've got a bunch of people living here, you're bringing in what's essentially European colonial settlers, right? That not essentially, that's exactly what they are. And if you feel like you have a right to fight for that land because of either promises that the Brits had made to you, because of the historic character of that land under the Ottoman Empire, whatever, I mean, I think you have a right to fight for that. I think that's completely understandable for sure.
Okay. Sorry, did you stop talking or did you get cut off?
No, I stopped talking.
Okay. I agree. I wholeheartedly agree. I don't think it's fair to make the assumption, if the Arabs won, even like the 48 war, they would have just kicked all the Jews out. Maybe they would have kicked out the European I can't say the word.
Colonizers?
Colonialists? Sure, there you go, colonizers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but I think at that point, wasn't it like fucking 90% of the Jews there would have been from Europe, right? Like the vast majority of them there weren't.
I think, in 1948, yes. I think in 1950, 51 is when it's like, I think today it's like 70-some% of the Jewish population is like Sephardic from Arab countries.
Sure, but like even when we say that, well, I would be careful here because the Zionists will kill me if I get these numbers wrong. But like, even if we say that 70% are Sephardic or whatever from Arab countries, they weren't from Palestine, Syria or whatever. They weren't from that area. They had immigrated from other Arab countries to go
Correct,
there.
Yes.
Right?
Morocco, Iraq, Yemen. Yes.
Yes.
I agree. And look, we can go back and forth and say Jews were living under persecution under Arab lands. I would say relatively to the time, they were pretty safe compared to like European countries.
That might be true. Okay, when I'm cutting you
Well,
off, I
you
just
need
want
the
to.
facts, like,
Yeah, I just want to.
sure,
I'm filling this out more because if I'm wrong on something, then you can tell me if I'm wrong on something. Prior to I think 1920 or 1930, I think the vast majority of Jews that were fleeing violence were coming from. I know the Russian Empire was a really big one. That there was a lot of pogroming and shit going on over there. I think the first Aliyah might have been almost exclusively. I think it was Eastern European Jews and then people from the Russian Empire. And I know that trend carried on for a while. However, I think from 48 onwards, all of the new flights of Jews happened because it seemed like every time Israel got into a major conflict with the surrounding Arab states, all of the other Arab countries kind of started pogroming and shit the Jewish people living there. And not all the Jewish people were like, well, fuck this. I think Benny Morris has argued, I think, on like different push and pull factors that like as many Jews left, it wasn't just because they were all being pushed out. It was also because they had like a cool new nation they wanted to go to and they're like, well, let's go. But like I think there's an argument that there was a push there, that they were being pushed out, and there was a pull from Israel too. But that 48, 67, I think even 58, it was because of the conflicts that they were starting to get kind of up in their home Arab states.
I agree. I believe, like you can even argue collective punishment. I think there was both push and pull. I think like obviously it's no, I don't think there was any written policy by any of these countries to expel Jews. Actually, I think some countries even said they are not allowed to emigrate to Israel. They need to stay here. I think Iraq was one of them.
Sure.
But I wouldn't like die on that hill, but I believe that's the case. I don't think there was any policy to expel Jews from those countries. Did they start facing more pogroms and persecution after the 48 war? I don't dispute that at all.
Sure. I will say that might be right. I'm not 100% sure, although a couple people are saying that apparently Egypt like gave them 24 hours to fuck off. So I'm not sure if that's true.
I believe it.
Okay, yeah.
I'm not gonna like argue that. Like very possible. I just know that they also had very prominent roles throughout the region prior to the creation of Israel. I know there was a Jewish advisor to the king of Morocco for a very long time, and they both had like escaped the Inquisition from Spain, et cetera, et cetera. So, regardless of getting into all that, 48 or 47 partition plan, can you see why the Arabs wouldn't have accepted that partition plan before any of this exodus happened from Middle Eastern countries?
Yeah, for sure.
Do you see the case why like it wouldn't really make sense? And I don't think you can argue for it. Okay, so at this point, I think we both kind of agree. Brits were kind of in giving and like kind of starting this problem.
They overpromised hardcore. Yeah.
They overpromised everything. They promised the French. They promised the Arabs. They promised the Zionists. Overpromised without taking into consideration the people that actually lived there. That's one. Now, post 48, 67, we can argue about who started the war. Obviously, Egypt controls Gaza and Jordan controlled the West Bank. And a lot of people say this, these Arab colonizers, no one was complaining. I think there's a very clear difference between Jordan controlling the West Bank and Israel controlling the West Bank. And if you want to argue that, we can. One, obviously settlements, obviously like checkpoints, like a million different things, like quote unquote apartheid roads.
Wait, can you repeat the last thing you just said before we got on this? Make the argument for what?
I'm saying I'm making the argument that Jordan controlling the West Bank is very different than how Israel's controlling the West Bank.
Oh.
And so obviously Palestinians are going to resist more how Israel's controlling it, not just because they're Jewish, but more so because how they're militarily occupying them and creating settlements and taking land and building things and like whatever, whereas Jordan kind of like just controlled it. I agree, but weren't necessarily subjugating the Palestinians to different laws and getting beaten. And I mean, obviously there was Black September and all of that, but I don't think they were being subjugated like they are against.
Yeah, I think I could.
As they are against the Israelis.
I think I could agree with that, but I think if I'm agreeing with that, I think that that's going to flesh out my argument more for why the Palestinian people didn't see themselves as being like a Palestinian people. They were just kind of like Arabs, a collection of Arabs living in this area, and they were part of like Jordan or Egypt, then of course I'd be chill because they're all kind of like a similar-ish people. But if they had strong feelings of like a Palestinian national identity, I don't know if I would agree that like, well, Jordan controlling us is at least better than Israel controlling us, even if the character of the occupation is different. Because
I
it
mean,
really
the
does seem to me, like I could be wrong, but it really does seem to me to be like in 48, Egyptian and Jordanian advancement into that historic Palestinian area it was literally just territorial conquest. Like that was it. They weren't there to just like protect the Palestinians or anything. They were just conquering territory. Like I think Jordan actually like conquered up to the 47 partition lines, and I think Jordan stopped. I don't even know if they like tried to make huge excursions into Israeli land.
So
go
this is actually Jordanians are very well hated amongst a lot of the Arab world because of this problem, because they feel like they were backstabbed, they were traitors, they gave land to Israel. Like the Iraqi military that had portions of like Haifa during the 48 war was handed over to Jordan, which kind of handed it over to Israel with agreements to take the West Bank. So I think when we talk about countries, we have to recognize that the people almost never represent, especially in Arab countries, represent what the leadership does. Like if you look at Egypt and Jordan, like the populations there hate Israel, even though there's peace treaties between the countries. But I don't disagree that there was a conquest by Jordan and Egypt by the on those lands. I do know that there was some in Gaza at least pushback and resistance against the Egyptians for a while. By no means like to the level we see now. And I believe the PLO, I'm not sure exactly when the PLO was established. I want to say before 67.
Well, let's see. The PLO was obviously big in
60,
70, but I think it's before 67 the PLO gets established. I think so, yeah. I think it's established, isn't it, in the West Bank? I can check, but go ahead.
I think it was in early 60s, but I believe it was before the 67 war, which to me shows clearly there was an identity prior to 67, like a Palestinian identity of wanting, their own state.
I would agree that like once Israel emerges, I think people really want to fight against Israel and really want to get rid of Israel. But at that point, I feel like those people wanting a state is a function of one, the other Arab states around them having states, and then two, like them wanting to kick the Jewish people out of Israel, basically, or the Israeli people out. So yeah, I would say that maybe around this point, like when these Palestinian parties start to form, they're like kind of quote unquote nationalist. But I think it's more in opposition to Israel more than like this historic yearning for their nation state is emerging from a Palestinian people. I think that would be my feeling on it. But go ahead.
I don't want us to get hung up on this so much, but I've heard Ben Shapiro say something like, "Oh, there was never a Palestinian like that. That's like a made-up word," which is maybe in English it was, but in Arabic, like Palestini has been around for like centuries. Like that term, it may have not been referring to the exact borders we see today. Obviously, these borders are pretty arbitrarily drawn by the Brits, but there was almost like a character, maybe not a character that seeked. You may be right. They wanted just one unified Arab country, but there was still a type of people, and maybe in the 60s is when they started really saying like, okay, it's time for us to get our own country because the Iraqis and the Egyptians, they all got their own countries. Like we were promised this from like the whatever ruler of Mecca, and we're not getting our land. But regardless, 67 war happens. We can disagree on who started that war. You can say it was a provocation from the closure of the Suez Canal, and I can say like, well, at the end of the day, Israel fired the first rocket and lied about it. So I'm not interested in going into that, like whatever. I'd rather focus on the present. 67. After 67, we have, I believe, there was at some point the PLO pretty early on recognized Israel's right to exist. And Israel as a state to live side by side with a Palestinian state. I don't know if you've done that in your readings or at all.
Was that a requirement for them to get that observer status in the UN? I know they did in the Oslo Accords, but that was in 93. Do you think it happened before that?
The observer state didn't happen until like 2012, like way later. At least the non-observer.
Wait, are you sure?
Pretty much access to the criminal court happened in 2012. I don't know exactly if there was like some recognition before then. I know they established themselves as a state. I want to say was it 93?
Well, 93 was Oslo Accords and everything. Wait, I thought it was like the 70s that they got some observer status. Oh yeah, here it is. I'm sorry. Okay, yeah, it's been a long time since I read this. Okay, so November of 1974, the PLO was granted observer status at the UN, and Yasser Arafat addressed the General Assembly. I don't know if this means that like the Palestine was recognized as an official state, although we're moving pretty far past Resolution 242 at this point. So maybe for the UN, I don't even know what it means for the UN to have a resolution to recognize a state that doesn't have a government. I don't know what any of that means. So even, yeah. But okay, go ahead.
Yeah, same. Yeah, I know in 2012 it changed. There was a vote. I believe it became an observer state before it was a non-observer state, or vice versa. Not 100% sure. Regardless, 73 war or 7. Obviously, Israel took more land. 73 Yom Kippur, Syria, Egypt attacked. Jordan kind of begrudgingly joined, and I think that there was a peace deal in 79. My dates could be wrong, sorry. 79 between Egypt and Israel to say, like, here, we're going to give you the Sinai back. This is over. Sinai Peninsula is yours, and we're all good to go. I think around that, or maybe it wasn't until the 90s where Jordan signed a peace treaty with Israel. Not 100% sure on the Jordan, but I know is some peace treaty there.
Yeah, I think Egypt was 70. I think Egypt was 79. And then I think it was like 76 to 79. And then Jordan, I think, was 94. Because I think it was a few years after the Madrid conference in 91. But yeah.
That sounds right. Yeah, early 90s for Jordan. Sounds right. During this time, since 67 till now, Israel has been continually building illegal settlements. I don't think that's like up for debate. I think you've acknowledged that. I think the entire world is on board with that these settlements are illegal by law, and the people living under this occupation have, and you can push back on this, have the right to resist.
Real quick, I don't know about that part. I'm very hesitant now on anything relating to international law. When we say the settlements are illegal under international law, is that like do we absolutely know that, or is this like a debated or contested thing?
I think America has even acknowledged these settlements as illegal. I don't think this is contested at this point. Feel free to do your research. I can try to find some sources on this. Okay.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see that. Yeah.
Obviously, it's a big point whether or not these settlements are illegal. I think the case for Israel is saying, well, Palestine isn't necessarily a country, so these settlements aren't technically illegal. I think that's the pro-Zionist case.
Okay.
So it's we can build on it because technically it's not a country, which is I think a weak case, since the majority of the world recognizes Palestine as a state. So fast forward, bunch of peace attempts at peace. I think like 8 or something. Madrid, you named a few. Oslo, right, is when we kind of broke up West Bank into the 3 areas for joint control, which I think was a terrible mistake by the Palestinians. I think at that point, Yasser Arafat, I'm trying to say like these names with like a non-Arabic accent. He was so desperate for recognition, where he just wanted to like agree to whatever he gets offered. That was my take on it. I will admit that's a opinion, and they agreed to this like really crappy situation where Israel controls Area C, joint control over Area B, and Palestinian control over Area A. All of these enclaves. So when you go there, it's essentially wait at a checkpoint for a few hours, arbitrary time, to get to the other side of like the equivalent of going from like LA to San Diego, right? It's like it's a 2-hour trip. It's going to take you like 12 hours at sometimes. And then obviously there's laws in the West Bank, military laws against, like, you go through military court if you're a resident of the West Bank, and you don't get the same rights obviously as an Israeli citizen. So a lot of bias there. I don't know if you've heard of a group called Breaking the Silence. I believe they were established in 2004 by IDF veterans that want to anonymously give their testimonies on what they do in the West Bank, and some of them are regretful, and some of them feel like that is something Israel has to do, and it's some crazy testimonies that you'll see on how Israel tries to essentially break the will of the Palestinians in the West Bank from wanting to have their own state. So settlers, I think you already talked about this, are pieces of shit, and settlements should be, for the most part, demolished and removed, and people should go back to Israel proper, and a two-state solution needs to happen. Now, my argument is in the past 15 years, there hasn't been any attempt by Israel, I would say quite the opposite, any type of solution. And so those living under occupation in, I would say Gaza is under occupation, and you can reject that point because they ripped out the settlements, like the 55,000, I think, settlers that were there. I would argue it's still under occupation because Israel has, the population registry, control over that, control over, obviously, airspace, the water, the borders. So I would argue that that's still technically an occupation. I don't know if you disagree with that phrasing.
I don't really care that much. I feel like it basically is an occupation. I think I got one person emailing me, pushing me back really hard, saying that like just because you embargo control these things, it's not an occupation. My feelings on that don't matter that much unless it's like a huge argument for something later on. Then maybe I would revisit this opinion and try to figure out. Yeah.
It's important because if it is an occupation, Israel is responsible for for those they're occupying, including giving them water, food, and electricity.
Sure.
That's why it's important to make that distinction.
Okay, yeah. So the reason why I would disagree is because I would say that even if it's not an occupation, all of the protective measures that Israel has up blockading that territory would still make them responsible. We'd probably end up agreeing, in fact. But yeah, Okay.
So given that the past 15 years nothing has really come out, I've seen you in the past, you'll call certain groups terrorist groups, which is fine. I don't want to argue that. And it's you kind of have to admit the IDF, and I know you've said that non-state actors are the only ones that can be designated as terrorist groups, or at least that's what you feel. And
hold on. Let me be super clear before we get into this one. And I said it feels like only non-state actors are generally classified as terrorists. What I'm working off of is that when we use words like terrorists, I think we're very much in these kind of bubbles of grouping things together. I don't think there's a strict definition. I don't even know in the United States. I think some of our orgs might disagree on what a terrorist is or isn't. So yeah, that's when I say that, I'm just saying how do we feel about things generally? I think that the word terrorist is a kind of a feeling word. I don't put much legal or moral authority necessarily behind it, right? You could probably argue that the early American revolutionaries were terrorists, or that the Boston Tea Party was a terrorist act, maybe, arguably, I'm not sure. Yeah. So I don't have strong feelings about that word. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Look, I couldn't agree more. I feel like the word has been kind of used in so many different contexts. I think from the pro-Palestinian side, it feels like any kind of armed resistance against the occupation, whether it's against Israel proper or settlements in the West Bank, is seen as terrorist, quote-unquote, terrorist attacks. Whereas when you look in the news, what settlers are doing are considered, extremist, violence, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I agree that it's more of an emotional word rather than meaning anything. Do you believe that groups or people under an occupation have the right to armed resistance? There is international law on this. There is I think the ICC. I can send you something about it, where if you are under occupation, you are technically allowed. Well,
careful. That is true, but none of that international law. None of the international law is going to allow you to kill civilians, right?
Absolutely.
None of the international law is going to allow you to do indiscriminate attacks. Yeah. So can they fight back in certain ways against occupying powers, or whatever? I mean, probably, but obviously that's not our issue in general. I don't.
It's very important. I know you you say probably, but it's they do have the right, right? If let's say a hypothetical. Palestinians in the West Bank killed an Israeli soldier. That should be allowed under international law, according to what you just said and according to what I'm saying, and not indiscriminately attacking civilians. I think it's really hard to argue against that. So I'm curious, do you think that they are Palestinians living in the West Bank or Gaza are allowed to attack military bases or
indiscriminately
sites or
kill soldiers. My leaning is like heavily no. I'm trying to think of ways to like claw back, because like it's the thing that's annoying about this is that like even calling this an occupation is like so, everything about the situation is so unique. Here would be a question for asking if I could compare this to something. Has there ever been in the history of the world a people who get occupied who aren't part of like a prior state?
Who aren't part of a prior, I mean,
like, so for instance,
say,
let's say there was like a country of let's say there was the country of Nebraska, and Iowa invades and indefinitely occupies, you know, Omaha, right? And they've got an occupation going on there, right? Like the people of Nebraska might fight against this occupation, but like, let's say that it like, if we're in like the Wild West or some shit, or there's not even a country declared yet, is that occupation of the same character as occupying a pre-existing state?
Why does it matter if it was a state or not?
Why does it matter if it was a state or not?
I mean,
well, because when we say
right?
an occupation, what are we occupying?
Sure. Something that's not yours. Something that's not yours in terms of like sovereignty. You don't have sovereignty over that land.
Sure, but when we say not yours, whose is it?
The people that live there. And look,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the state of Palestine is recognized by over 100 countries now.
Well, like retroactively though, right? Like not at the time, right?
I mean, settlements have been built since then.
Sure. No, yeah, I agree. But I'm just saying that the because
it's
like,
a hard
yeah,
argument that you're gonna try to make here. It's,
well, hold on, wait. I don't agree with that. I don't think it is a hard argument. I think it's a confusing one, but I think it's confusing on all sides. I don't think it's like clearly confused on one side and obviously true on the other. The idea that like a people who live in an area obviously indefinitely, forever and ever into infinity, control that land, even if their country collapses and dissolves, that's fantastic. I don't know if that's ever been true at any point in human history, right? So the Palestinians did not have a state. The Ottoman Empire collapsed. The idea that every single people living in every single part of the Ottoman Empire have an indefinite right to forever settle that land, I think that that's ridiculous to assume that would be the case. Do we agree with that or no?
Who else would be able to, who else would have the right to settle on that land if not the people living there?
I mean, it would be other people through conquest, no? Isn't that how the land was originally settled?
Okay.
Or let's say, here's a question, right? Let's say that it wasn't even through conquest. Let's say that if we look at historic Palestine and we say, was it 200,000 or 300,000 that were living in that whole region? What if you just like conquered the land like in between the villages? Is that okay since nobody lives there, but you left like the villages alone? Or do they also own all the land that they're not even on?
In my opinion, I think it's more of like, it's hard to say, like, do I own this street in front of my house? Like, can someone come and occupy that street?
Well, no, the United States does, right? Well, no, that's all very clear. You probably have an easement with the city for like your sidewalk. The streets themselves are owned by the city or the municipality, right?
No, let's talk about historical Palestine for a second, right?
Sure.
Did they own the streets they lived on, like, assuming it was historical Palestine and this, like, conquest came in and, like, if they come and build bases on my roads and my city streets and the outskirts of my village, is that not an occupation?
Well, isn't that exactly what the Ottoman Empire did when they took over territory and when the Palestinians started moving in there and everything? Like, isn't that exactly what happened? Isn't that why there's a second temple, and isn't that why there's an Al-Aqsa mosque, and isn't that why? Yeah, I mean, like that's.
I just want to know what you're trying to argue. Are you trying to argue that there isn't an occupation, or are you trying to argue that this is such a unique situation that it's going to be hard to apply occupation laws to it?
Yeah, what I'm saying, it's weird because it's hard to apply occupation laws to it because the territory that Israel took in 1967, right? They didn't take territory from the Palestinians, right? None of the territory that was
say-
captured. No, seriously, it wasn't. None of the territory
Well,
captured in '67 was
then-
from Palestinians. It was territory captured from Jordan, which is renounced ownership of it, and it was territory captured from Egypt, which is renounced ownership of it, and then it was territory captured from Syria, the Golan Heights, which is currently disputed. So we've conquered territory now and drawn armistice lines around territory from other countries, and now those countries are like, well, we don't want that territory now. They've resigned to it. So who was it even conquered from to say that it's currently in occupation?
I mean, the fact that doesn't Resolution 242 like the world's acknowledging these borders, and this is the Palestinian state and this is a Israeli state, doesn't that kind of like tell you like, okay, this is their land now? And let's say it doesn't, right? Are you saying that the French occupation of Algeria in the 1800s was not an occupation because I don't, or any kind of colonization by the Brits, through the history of time, were those not occupations? Because if the countries weren't defined borders yet, like the idea of like countries coming to existence, and like a lot of them came to existence, like this nationalist movement in early 1900s when regions started turning into countries from empires, is like not a super old idea. So we can't just look at country borders as being like actual the only thing that counts, right? Like, do you dispute that the French occupied Algeria for almost 100 years?
Okay, so I want to be very clear that everything here is very difficult, okay? Because when we talk about, here's a couple things I think we'll probably agree with, right? The concept of like empires or nations with self-contained like borders and governments. I want to say, did this concept start to largely like substantiate? Was it like not until the 1800s, or was it even a bit later? But like
I would say, yeah, around the late 1800s, early 1900s. I know like the Austro-Hungarian Empire, there was like 12 different countries that wanted to come out of it, and like Algeria wasn't founded as a country until like 1879 or something, and before that they were occupied by the French. And your argument is, well, they weren't technically occupied because it wasn't technically a country.
Well, no, wait. I haven't even gotten to that point. Wait, I haven't gotten to that point yet, right? I just wanted to establish, first of all, that like the idea, like the coherent, or I'm sorry, the idea that we use right now for like nations and countries is a relatively newly emerged phenomenon, right? The only reason why I'm saying this is because when we talk about like an occupation, I'm uncomfortable comparing like an occupation now versus like an occupation like 300 years ago, because I think it's a bit different. Kind of like I would be comfortable calling like the actually I'm not sure. I had an Australian scholar come on once and argue with me that the idea that like you can't call things from like the 1400s or 1500s a genocide. It's weird to retroactively apply these newer understandings of international law. So I don't want to argue about the genocide thing, but I'm just saying like that's why I would say I'd be careful.
You're right.
So
you're right. I agree with the retroactively like labeling things, but these occupation laws came into play prior to the 67 occupation.
Yeah. So I guess my question would be then is, again, when there was an occupation of, if we say there was an occupation from 67 onwards, who was the occupation of? Like, who was being occupied? Like what?
I would say the land that was remaining from the 1948 or 47 partition plan that was designated for the Arabs. That's what I would say. The remainder of that, because like you can't say it's like you're almost giving that super pro-Zionist, like there's a people, it's a land, or it's a people without a land and then a land without a people argument. There was people there was villages there, and they've been there for centuries, and whether they were a national and they wanted their own nation is
hold on, wait, let's
1947.
Or go ahead, you can finish your point. I'll fight you on that a little bit. Go ahead.
In 1947, my point is there was a partition plan made, Arabs rejected. There was a war that followed. Israel was able to expand to what was the 1967 armistice line, or the 1949 was the armistice line. So 67 was like the borders that the 242 resolution points out as being, okay, this is the newly defined state of Israel. And that's when the UN recognized the state of Israel at the 1967 borders. Like, you can't go back and push them back into the 47 borders, which is fine. But I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, your argument is, well, the Palestinians within the 1967 borders, it's not technically their land, so there is no occupation because what are they occupying? That's what your argument is, right?
I'm not trying to make that argument that because of a technicality on when nations became nations, we've like used some kind of like verbal kung fu to get rid of the concept of the occupation. Okay, I'm not trying to make that argument because I think we both agree that that'd be a kind of wacky argument to make. But what I would like people to recognize is when we use these words like occupation, I think people think that they're standing on far firmer ground than they actually are. The ground here is incredibly shaky. Even when we talk about like Resolution 242, how many Arab states do you think would have originally signed on to that? Because my understanding is it would be like 0.
When you say originally, do you mean like back in 1967? Or do you mean like ever? Because I think the Arab League had came out with like a joint statement in the 90s, recognized Israel's right to exist, peace to Israel, and no more problems based on the 1967 borders. I will say they did like request like full right of return, blah blah blah.
Yeah,
but
because my understanding is like
at this point.
Yeah, because Resolution 242. Keep in mind that 242 would have required, part of that was a requirement of recognizing Palestine as a state.
Absolutely.
Also came with it recognizing Israel as a state. And I don't know if the
100%.
other Arab states in that region would have even been okay with that. I would have to go back and check to see what they're saying. I think in Wikipedia it says like they consulted them, but I don't know like in terms of their agreement with that or not. But
sure.
Yeah.
But
But anyway,
I know in the 90s.
Oh, go ahead.
They've acknowledged Israel. Like in the 90s, they've acknowledged Israel. It's like, you have the right to exist, like based on whatever 242 and a just resolution to the refugee problem. And I know we're getting caught up in like definition of occupation, and you say it's like a shaky ground.
Sure. I'm not, by the way, when you say caught up in the definition, I don't think we're caught up at all. I think it's incredibly important to like analyze how strict the ground here is, because like if this was a strict occupying force that had taken land from another sovereign state, like comparable to, say, what's going on with Russia and Ukraine right now, I think you have very strong, not only international authority, I think you have a very strong moral authority to stand on this ground and fight for your particular rights to that land. I don't think that that ground is anywhere near as firm as pro-Palestinian people would make it out to be. And we can fight on that for a variety of reasons if you want, or we can move on and we can say this isn't that important. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say there's no occupation at all. Like, clearly, there's some type of occupation. Yeah, of course, yeah.
I understand your point. I don't like to make the distinction between, they were countries, they weren't country prior, they're a country now, it was a part of an empire, blah, 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 blah. Like, we agree that there's an occupation, whatever, however strong those grounds are, like, you can fight back at me. I mean, like, America itself, Israel itself has recognized that it's an occupation. So it's not like, no one's really fighting on this, so I don't think there's a point for us to fight on it.
Sure, that's fine.
Unless you're like some far-right parties in Israel.
Sure, but I want to be careful in that because the only reason why we're fighting on this was because it came up with, do you think somebody should have a right to fight against an occupier? And you did a little sneak there where you said, well, even the United States recognizes it's an occupation. I doubt the United States would say, but Israelis have a right, or I'm sorry, Palestinians have a right to fight back and kill Israeli soldiers the same way that we would say Ukraine has a right.
It doesn't.
Well, sure, but we just cited.
You're right.
Sure, but I'm just saying we cited as like U.S. opinion against this. What?
What's in writing and what's like the consensus? And the consensus of look, America has always stated that settlements are illegal, but every time there's a resolution to condemn the settlements, they either veto or abstain by saying, we believe both sides need to negotiate. It doesn't change the fact that the settlements are illegal. You can say that. You can say, like, America can in one breath say, yeah, the settlements are illegal, and another breath say, but we're going to, like, veto this resolution condemning the settlements. Doesn't really make a lot of sense. That's why it's like...
Well, sure, but I think...
countries...
But, like, we would look at, like, Ukraine, and we would say Ukraine is completely within their right to fight back. And we would fund them, and we give them weapons. We're like, yeah, fight and kill Russians, right? So I think I think it's important to look at, like, how we view it, right? Although I do acknowledge the U.S. is against the settlements, but, yeah.
I think the U.S.'s support for different countries is based on their own like self-interest, which is fair. I think U.S. isn't just giving weapons to Ukraine because it feels like wants to be like feels like it's the right thing to do, even if it is. I think there's like some self-interest there, but I don't know much about the Ukraine conflict, so I'm not going to pretend to.
Sure, that's fine.
But for this current situation, I've heard you say, like, anytime, like, Palestinian people committed Palestinian terrorist attacks or terrorist attacks, Hamas has committed terrorist attacks because of, like, this bombing of this bus or this area or this, like, stabbing of this soldier or whatever it is. I think it's important when we're using words to, like, keep the same standard for both sides. So Israel has committed, in my opinion, like, much worse terrorist attacks, like, severely worse. I'm not talking like the Cave of Patriarchs or some, like, random delusional guy. I'm talking about, like, policy-wise. Now, would you, kind of fast forward to the current conflict in Gaza, do you believe that post-October 7th, there has been...
Wait, can I clarify real quick? Because just when you say
Sure.
Israel's committed way worse, you just mean because they're an occupying force and they enact double standard measures on different citizens. That's what you mean, right? Or what do you mean by that?
Double measure standards, yeah, that's one. I think the proportion of their, like, example, a guy stabs an Israeli soldier in the West Bank, his family's home is demolished, and Israel goes into, let's say he's living in Jenin, goes into Jenin and, like, kills, like, 5 people trying to find him, and, like, all this other, like there's, like, a double standard. Whereas an Israeli shoots a Palestinian dead. I don't know if you've heard of it. There was, like, a Palestinian teenager. I want to say he's a teenager, but he stabbed an Israeli soldier, was shot. He was lying on the ground. There's a video of this. He wasn't dead yet, and just some random Israeli soldier walks up to him, point blank range, and shoots him in the head. He gets arrested, goes to jail for like 12 months or something.
How recent was this?
This was in the 2010s.
Okay, I'd be curious and see the story on that. That'd be.
I can show you the actual video of the kid.
I like to see the story too. I just want to have the full context of it.
Yeah, let me.
Also, wait, while you look for that real quick, and you can say, hold on, I'm gonna use yours real quick, okay? 1 sec.
Sure.
Wait, can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you. Where do you want me to send you this article? This is the shooting of the 21-year-old. Kind of was like an injured Palestinian. If you're interested, I don't have to send it to you if you're not interested. It's just
I am.
This guy.
Yeah, I sent your friend out on Discord. You can accept and then send me there.
So here's that. And if you're into some NSFW, what's that? Here's the YouTube video. I think he did something like a year in prison. Just pretty wild. Just like you're on video, point blank, shooting a guy in the head. To be fair, the Palestinian tried to stab an Israeli soldier, but to my previous case,
to be fair, yeah, that's still horrible.
It's okay, yeah, it's horrible, which is why I started with the argument, like, do they have the right to armed resistance? But regardless, let's say
no, hold on. I'm sorry, you misunderstood me. I said it's horrible to shoot the guy in the head if he's on the ground, even if you try to stab somebody. That's
sorry.
horrible.
Yeah. I did misunderstand you.
Yeah, yeah. Hold on 1 second. Wait, when does he get shot again in this video?
Okay, let me... You're gonna make me watch this, aren't you? Okay, hold on. Okay, go to, like, 148. Start from there. I don't know if they don't show, like, the actual moment it happened, or if they, like, skip. They might skip.
Wait, does the shooting happen at 148? I'm just trying to figure out, is he, like, already shot, or does he get shot in this video? I don't know the volume.
I'm trying to see. I specifically remember, like, a video of him, like, cocking his gun, walking up and, like, blasting him. Trying to find it. Yeah, so he's moving at, like, 19 seconds, 20 seconds. Oh, okay. So at 150, you'll see a guy, like, cock his gun in the back. He's wearing, like, a cap, not a helmet. And then he walks up to him, aims, and he shoots.
Wait, at what time?
I just saw the shot happened exactly at 154. So go to 150 and start from there. It's like the van comes right into view.
Okay, hold on 1 sec. Where's the guy that I'm looking for with the gun?
So he's okay.
Or I guess actually it's on YouTube, so I can probably watch it on stream. 1 sec. Wait, no. Or sorry, hold on.
It blurs it out.
Okay, at 150.
150, you'll see a guy, I want to say he's like facing the camera, not the closest soldier to the
Oh wait, I see.
the
This guy back here, yeah.
Yeah, and he aims and just pops him.
What? Jesus.
Yeah, and he ended up going to jail for like, I think they sentenced him to 18 months, and he ended up getting off early, and everyone was like praising him as a hero, especially like right, left politicians. But this isn't something like, in my opinion, super unique. Like, you can go to Betselem's YouTube channel, which you're on, and look at all of the different videos they post of documenting things that happen in the occupied territories. It's like pretty vicious. And even during the Hawata rampage or pogrom, whatever you want to call it, you can see in the videos Israeli soldiers walking with them. And I want you just to imagine if, it was switched, if it was Palestinian, and their excuse was, oh,
well, wait, hold on, wait. Let me look up this guy's name real quick. Careful with that. Be careful if it was switched, because I'm probably going to be able to find a lot of way more egregious examples than that, would be my guess.
No, I'm saying if it was switched and Israeli soldiers did nothing. That's my argument here. I'm saying if Palestinians were attacking settlers in like swaths of like 200, and Israeli soldiers were around them, protecting them, and not doing anything because, quote unquote, they didn't anticipate that level of violence. There's so many videos showing this of like.
I'm having a really hard time following the.
Okay, this is.
What you're saying.
I'll let you read through this
Sure.
first, and then I can show you some other stuff.
Okay, let me find. I just want to find the name of the soldier that shot. I'm curious if there was a rationale for why he got so little time in jail. Dude, my voice. I'm getting so fucking triggered.
His name is. I can send you his name if you would like. So his last name is Azaria.
Hold on, I'll find him. Give me like 60 seconds. And this is sure.
Okay, that's just like one of like so many examples. I can give you a video of like settlers breaking buildings in the West Bank with soldiers next to them just really doing nothing.
Can I, before we move on to that, just so that we're on the same footing here, has there ever been a video, or has there ever been a case where like Hamas or the PLO has held one of their own accountable for killing an Israeli citizen for no provocation? I'm only bringing this up because you said that this was like an example of Israel acting even worse than Hamas or the PLO.
So if there's ever a Israeli citizen, I want to speak to the West Bank first a bit. If there's ever an Israeli citizen that gets killed by a Palestinian in the West Bank, it's almost always, and I'm curious to see if you can prove me wrong on this, an extreme response by the Israeli government immediately, where they go in with their military vehicles and take that person out and hunt them down. So it's almost there's no real need for the PLO to. I mean, even if the PLO did want to do that, they're not going to have, or the PA. Get confused by the abbreviations, but they're not going to be able to respond as effectively as Israel is going to for an occupied territory they're occupying.
Do you think that part of that like vengeance mentality, which is bad by the way, I don't think it's good, but do you think part of that vengeance mentality might be because they know that the PLO isn't going to give them any justice? That there's no chance that the PLO is going to do an investigation or anything? Because like, doesn't the PLO still pay out from that martyr fund if you end up martyring yourself to kill? So isn't that a little different, right?
Look, I think the reason why this can't be looked at as a back and forth, like a super even comparison, is because again, one side is occupying the other. Now, if you told me that this was, two states and this happened and the PLO wasn't doing anything, or the Palestinian Authority or whoever's controlling the area isn't doing anything, then it's like, that's more of an even comparison. And it's like, yeah, fuck yeah, they should go and like, put that guy in jail or extradite them to Israel proper. I think it's just not a fair comparison, given the power imbalance of the area.
Sure, we can say that, but then that means that when we're acknowledging these things, that when you say Israel is doing worse than the Palestinians, that's not built on like a factual like, what are they doing in terms of each individual crime? It's built on just the occupation, right?
Yeah, I mean, the basis is the imbalance of power in the region, and you have one side, and it's like, why are these Palestinians attacking soldiers in the West Bank? Because, like, is it for fun? Because if that's the case, why aren't the Palestinians in Israel proper attacking the soldiers? Like, it's not these arbitrary, random terrorist attacks. Like, I hate when the Zionist arguments, oh, these crazy radical Muslims, like, they just want to kill all of us. Like, it's such a stupid argument. And I think that's obviously not this case. Arab countries have been able to make peace with Israel, and Palestinians within the Israel proper have been able to live amongst Jews and prosperity.
But like, doesn't that further the argument that the Palestinian people in the occupied territories are more radicalized because the ones living in Israel aren't crazy, and then the other Arab states aren't crazy?
So, or it kind of or you can look at it in the other perspective where, radicalization happens when your rights are diminished and taken away. Because again, when we look at expulsion that happened in 47 and 48 during the war, a lot of people that left Haifa and left Jaffa and left these regions that are in the West Bank now, some of them remained. They lived in the same villages. So my argument would be, the violence that we're seeing is a result of the occupation, is a result of the lack of self-determination.
Okay, but if we're talking about like the PLO, what was like the lack of self-determination, or what was the rights being infringed upon by the PLO in the late 60s and early 70s in Jordan? Why did they try to coup the government?
I think at that point it's unfair to compare, because that was like fairly fresh in terms of when Israel was established, 15 years prior, Israel's establishment. So it's like their mindset back then was like, we need to take out the whole thing. I agree. Like, that was their mindset. The wounds were still not healed. But even back then, I would say the Palestinians living under Israel proper are not violent. And in 10 years, you're not just going to become. Well, but
I don't know. When you say Palestinians living in Israel, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think there are any Palestinians living in Israel. I think there were people that used to be Arabs, but they're just Israeli citizens. They're not Palestinians.
So a lot of them recognize. I agree. A lot of them do see themselves as Israeli, but I would say the majority see themselves as Palestinians.
Yeah, that's fine. But I would argue it's like it's a quasi-fictitious term.
They're the same. How different are those people? Just by living in different lands for 50 years, it makes them like a completely different people. It doesn't make sense.
Well, do you think the people living in the borders of modern Palestine were significantly different than the people living in the borders of modern Jordan or modern Egypt or modern Syria or modern Lebanon?
I would say they were more different.
No, the answer is obviously no. That's not true. There's no evidence of that at all, right?
So you don't think the people living in Haifa were different than the people living in Cairo?
No. We're not talking about. You're not saying the people living in Haifa. You're saying the people living in Haifa, the people living in Ramallah, the people living in Bethlehem, the people living in Ramallah or whatever, the crossing. You're saying all of those people have a lot of similarities, and all those people are similarly different than the people in Cairo. That's not true.
That's what you're saying. Actually, yeah. I see what you're saying.
All of these people are different, right?
I agree have differences, but what I'm saying is 700,000 of the people that lived not in Ramallah, within the actual Israel proper, that were expelled. A lot of them ended up in the West Bank, right? Like, I think 200,000-300,000 ended up in the West Bank. I'm saying those people are similar to the people that were in Haifa, and because that's where they came from, like 50 years prior, right? And even if you were to argue that they're still similar to those in Jordan and those in Egypt, even those countries were able to find peace with Israel. So I think it's wrong to say inherently these Palestinians in the West Bank are just violent. When if you're going to say all Arabs are the same, then it's like, okay, how is Jordan able to find peace? If you say all Arabs aren't the same, all the Palestinians are the same, how are the Palestinians that stayed within the Israel proper were able to find peace?
Wait, I don't even know if these are. I don't know if I would ever make either of those two statements. All the Arabs are the same, or all the Arabs aren't the same. Or I don't.
No, I'm not saying you're. Yeah. I'm not saying you're making this argument. I'm just saying, in either scenario, the Palestinians. You can't say the Palestinians in the West Bank are inherently more violent because they're the only ones that are under occupation. Like, no other Arabs are under occupation besides those Palestinians, obviously in Gaza. Now, my argument is if there was a two-state solution, violence will drop by a lot. Will it go to zero? Probably not immediately. That's why I think eventually there needs to be a one state, but you can chop my head off on that later.
I disagree. And I don't think there's any reason to believe that. Jesus fuck. Do you want to argue? Can we argue about this tomorrow? I'm very fucking irritated right now. Like I can't talk because if I start talking more, I'm losing my voice. I can't fucking say it. It's actually triggering the fuck out of me.
Totally fine. I can hit you up sometime tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, we're friends on Discord now. So if you want, message me tomorrow when I start streaming, and then we can. Yeah. Does that sound okay? Wait, hello. Oh fuck, you disappeared.
Hello?
Oh, hello.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what you didn't hear anymore, but I was going to say that's fine. I can ping you like tomorrow or the day after, whatever. Feel better. Take care. Thanks for the chat.
Yeah, no problem. Wait, do you want to do any final closing words? Because I kind of cut you off like in the middle of that. You can do like your final summary of that argument, and then we can resume tomorrow, so that you know, so that you can put a pin on this, so you know where to come back tomorrow too. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess my final argument is Palestinians are getting subjugated, and in the West Bank and Gaza. And Israel has made it very clear that there's no plan to give them any kind of self-determination. And I feel like until that happens, there's going to continue violence is going to continue. And October 7th can't be looked at in a vacuum. That's all.
Okay. I love you. We can talk more tomorrow, okay?
All right. Feel better. Bye.
Bye. I don't know if I can't tell if my voice is a function of being sick or if it's a function of continuing to talk. Listen, I really want to talk to you. It'd be super fun, but I don't think I can. I think I'm just destroying my voice for even longer than it needs to be.
Sorry about your voice. Okay. No
or
worries.
wait, you're a doctor. You tell me. Is my voice just because I'm sick and it'll get better, or if I keep talking with a sore throat, I'm actually prolonging the total amount of time that my voice will be fucked for?
I'd give it a little bit of a rest.
Is that your professional medical opinion?
No. It's not even my field, and you're not my patient.
Okay.
But I don't think we probably even disagree that much. I disagree with the threshold, like the numbers you posted. I don't disagree with the overall point. Like I think there is some point at which like Israel would cave to pressure. It's just that the threshold after recent events, and seeing like how the international community is, especially after October 7th, is going to be a lot stronger than the type of pressure they've caved to before. And that's not to say that they can't be done. It's just to say that they're going to be a lot more resistant to international pressure being the sole motivator before. I think in terms of the numbers, I saw 15,000 and 20,000.
I mean, my guess would be that if we went over like 20,000 civilian casualties, that people would start losing their minds. That'd be my guess, but
yeah, we might already be there.
Well, the official reported ones is it still 11,000 or has it hit 12,000?
No, it's 14,128 from the Gaza Strip right now. So I think and that's just what has been reported. That's probably a whole bunch that are just unaccounted for under rubble right now. So I probably would lean on the side that it's already past 15,000, and I wouldn't be surprised if we're already close to 20,000. So we might even already be there at 20,000.
Sure. But I think if the publicly reported number hits 20,000, I would be shocked if there's a ground incursion into southern Gaza. I feel like it can't happen, but I could be wrong. We'll see. Yeah.
There is some number where I would share that sentiment. It's just going to be higher than 20. That's all.
What do you think? Obviously, I'm not like into like fucking hardcore statistics. What do you think that number would look like? Like, obviously, 500,000 would be way too much.
No,
right?
yeah. So 500,000 would be way too much. It's probably going to look somewhere between more like 50 to 100,000.
You think so? Okay.
Yeah. More. Yeah. I think we're probably already at 20,000, and it's only a short amount of time before the public numbers probably hit somewhere around 20,000. They've jumped really quick from the last few days, from like 10,000 to we're already almost at 15,000. So I think the main thing, I mean, look, here's the thing, like you have to overcome certain things that you didn't have to overcome before with that type of pressure. You have to overcome, they're in a situation, I mean, Bibi is in a situation right now where he basically has one thread to like potentially salvage his political career.
Which is what? The total annihilation of Hamas.
Which is the total, well, not just, like, not even that. Like, the total annihilation of Hamas plus a very substantial amount of hostages returned.
Do we even know how many, like, are alive at this point, or?
Well, we know at least 53 are alive because it looks like a deal is going to go through. That this is breaking news, so take everything, hopefully, but, with a grain of salt. So it looks like Netanyahu has given the go-ahead on a hostage agreement and a truce agreement with Ismail Haniyeh, probably butchering the pronunciation of the name, but that's the leader of Hamas in Qatar. The deal involves, it does not involve any adult male hostages. It only involves minor males and minor females and adult females. It involves approximately 53 hostages, and the expected ceasefire duration will be, I think, around 5 days. And it will also involve releasing a good number of Palestinian prisoners that are minors and female. So, and it looks like that deal is going to go through. Bibi has made a statement that after, it's tough consideration, but he's going to recommend the ministers vote in favor, the security ministers vote in favor of it. Anything can change until that time, but it looks like they are going to go in that direction. He did also say that, like, after the ceasefire expires, like after that pause stops, whatever you want to call it, ceasefire or pause, that he will continue everything, including going into southern Gaza, including, like, nothing else will change. It's just to abide by the pause. The troops will stay put until the exchange happens. And then the ceasefire duration expires, and then everything else will continue. What needs to be overcome is, like, there needs to be, so from his perspective, like, it's going to be very hard for him to salvage any thread of his political career without accomplishing at least one of those two goals. Like, one goal is, what doesn't seem tenable anymore, is, like, all the hostages recovered, which is not going to happen because some are dead and some are missing, and etc., or at least a substantial amount of them. The other thing is just the total destruction of Hamas. After the intelligence and security failure of October 7th, if he doesn't do one of those things, he's just done. That's it. Like, there's no coming back from that. Unless he can say, okay, yes, I totally fucked up. This was a complete screw up on my part, but at least I accomplished this. At least I recovered most of the hostages, or at least I completely ended Hamas. Probably one of the two, especially if the only one is the hostages one, will not be enough to salvage his career. The Hamas one is probably the thread that has the highest probability of keeping his hopes alive in any political capacity. So that's the sort of pressure that needs to be overcome in a situation like that. So it's going to be, there is some amount of international pressure that can do that.
I agree. Oh my fucking god! If you want to come back tomorrow, we should chat about this more.
Sure.
I was gonna
Sorry,
say this. No, you're good. There's so much I want to say. I agree with you insofar as Netanyahu is concerned, but I don't think that what you're saying serves the country of Israel. I don't even know if it serves the current composition of the Knesset.
I see. Yeah.
No, at some point, like, what you're talking about is that might salvage Netanyahu's reputation, but I don't know if Israel wants to bear however much negative PR, especially, God forbid, for Israel. Imagine if the civilian death toll got so high that all the progress they've made with Middle Eastern leadership starts getting rolled back. That would be unreal, right?
Yeah.
We don't know if it's permanent right now, but I'm pretty sure, I think Bahrain, I think the UAE, I think Sudan, and there might have been one other country, have already, like, temporarily pulled ambassadors from Israel. Like, imagine if they killed so many Palestinians in Gaza that other Arab citizens started to get so ass mad that other states that had previously been on friendly terms with Israel start to roll over on that. I think that the Knesset, I think that the political establishment would look at Netanyahu and go, sorry, bro, you're eating this one. Like, get the fuck out. Like, his reputation isn't worth. Yeah.
Yeah, no. And all of the factors I'm bringing is just like it's all in service of of that. So I'm not saying the only factor is Netanyahu, although that is a very big factor. But whatever it is, it's just that the general point is just the same. It's just, yeah, there is some threshold you can cross. It's just a lot. You got to climb a lot higher. That's all. Yeah. So I won't bother your voice anymore. Let me know how you feel in the morning.
I should be good tomorrow. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Love you, man.
Take care.
Okay, I'm gonna go eat some cough drops and take like an hour-long hot shower. Some guy emailed me and said his mom is like a political something area of study. She wanted to talk about this, so that's what I was gonna talk to. I'm gonna see if my voice can recover before that in like an hour and 15 minutes. So.
I'm just a random mom that attended your speech in Ames with my son, and I think you've kind of inspired him to think, research, explore issues a little bit more, and I think he thought it would be fun if we interacted because we've been talking a lot about Israel-Palestine lately.
Gotcha. Okay, wait, and also, not completely random. I think, didn't your son say you had like a bachelor's in, was it international
Peace
studies
studies.
or peace studies? Okay, gotcha. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm by no means an expert in peace studies or Israel-Palestine per se. I did take a full semester class on conflict in the Middle East in general, which involved quite a bit of detail about Israel-Palestine, but that's been quite a while ago. I went to college with lots of Palestinians, and I have a fair amount of Jewish friends who I interact with regularly, and we chat about it too. So,
okay, gotcha. Well, where do you want to start? I'm not sure how familiar you are with my position, or I can give mine and you can give yours, or I don't know what your familiarity level is right now.
Yeah, I don't know. We watched several clips last night, and I don't know that we're super far apart in terms of our positions. We watched the one, I don't know what the guy's name was. That was the journalist that...
Dan Cohen, yeah.
Dan Cohen, yeah. And so you guys had kind of started to go back a little bit back and forth on the one state, two state, before he just kind of devolved and called you names.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works right now in media, yeah. But...
So, I mean, that's one thing that kind of sparked my thought process because you challenged him. I think it's pretty easy to say, like, ideally a one-state solution would be pretty cool, right? But is it realistic, and what would make Israeli citizens as well as Palestinians comfortable living in that kind of a society? And I think that's where a lot of the peace building efforts that have been going on over the past few decades would have to come into play. So things like a truth commission to go through, all the way back in history, and for each side to kind of give their accounting of how they feel they've been wronged, what the damage has been, who the actors were, and how they feel it can be repaired from both sides. And then a lot of the efforts have been focusing on kids. So like sending Israeli kids and Palestinian kids to camp together, to school together, to workshops together, in order to start building those relationships and breaking down kind of the assumptions and things that they're taught when they're just completely segregated and not interacting and just seeing sort of media,
Okay, yeah, sure. I don't think I necessarily oppose any of those things. We might not be that far apart then, maybe in our position. I think the main thing I usually fight against is I see a lot of like dogmatic adherence to one state or nothing. And I feel like the one state is it's a complete non-starter. I think it probably has been for 75 years, and I don't see that ever changing. So I get really frustrated that I feel like the majority of at least the online conversation is dominated by the one state discourse. But it sounds like I guess you're not fully on board with the one state thing, or you're okay with like some sort of mediated two-state solution, or...
For sure. I mean, I think, right, like there has to be a path forward for both groups to be able to live in a society where they feel like they have power, dignity, safety, and the ability to express their culture. And, I think the biggest block, of course, is the right to return for the Palestinian refugees because, there's just so many. I actually work in immigration law. Mm-hmm. So I see on my side, people who end up coming here and kind of the history of where they've lived throughout those generations. And, the highest level of stateless people that I see are Palestinian stateless individuals. Mm-hmm. And it's being perpetuated now where if you're a spouse of a Palestinian individual, you're limited on how long you can remain in Palestine. So foreign spouses aren't able to cohabitate in Palestine, which is kind of one of those examples of how the other debate we had was whether this is apartheid, right? This was the other thing that Ben was saying. And that's one thing where I'm saying, where I was telling him, unless people have equal access to justice, then I think that's where you start looking at what's the definition of apartheid and how are these things institutionalized in a way that's discriminatory.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I'm not sure we're super far apart on anything.
Not at all.
Yeah. Well, what your son made it sound like we were gonna be screaming at each other. I guess for the apartheid stuff, I'm not usually as concerned about it because I feel like the apartheid conditions are a function of the occupation, the military borders. I feel like there's no world where the apartheid stuff gets fixed while it's an occupation. But I feel like if the occupation stuff gets fixed, the apartheid stuff essentially goes away because there'd be a separate Palestinian state. Or if there were prevailing apartheid conditions, everybody would be against them, like easily. It'd be the worst thing in the world. So that's why I don't fixate on like the apartheid stuff that much. But yeah, I don't know. Damn. Well, this is your son's fault. Is there anything else? Is there anything like in particular? I guess he's mentioned that you're really wrong on this, and he's like, well, I heard it from Destiny, or any positions that he's got. Do you think that I have that we're really far apart on, or?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I think that he. As a peacemaker, I think I tend to approach these with yes and sort of attitude, So I think he thinks I'm pretty hardline, but when you really get into it, I'm open and listening to and aware that there's harm done on both sides. I think I've had to influence him towards seeing what's not represented in the media as much, which is what is it actually like to live under Palestinian control? What are the harms being perpetuated against the Palestinian people? Because we do hear about all of the attacks and everything against Israel. And so, I think that's one thing that maybe we share is parenting adolescent kiddos and how we talk about this and how we help them access additional information in order to make good critical judgments on what they're seeing in the media.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question. Can I ask you this? There'll be a chain of questions from here, pretty obvious ones, but do you think there can be peaceful, resolutions to issues if Hamas remains in charge of the Gaza Strip?
Yeah, I don't think so. They're a militaristic organization, not a political organization per se. They're likely funded by Iran. So, no, I think we kind of lost out as the PLO kind of waned out of their power and went back on recognizing Israel as a state in terms of solid leadership for the Palestinian people and a good direction forward in terms of leadership for them.
What do you think? what do you think is the solution? So you can talk through this. I'm just curious. So obviously right now, we've got two huge contradictory forces where Israel and probably a lot of the world, even a lot of the Middle East, probably wants Hamas gone. But also, a lot of people don't want 50,000 civilians killed or more, right? Even the current numbers are probably higher than most people would be willing to stomach for this.
Right.
So we've got a lot of push for a ceasefire. Ceasefire obviously means Hamas remains, but the civilians stop. What do you think? I guess if you're in Israel's position, what's the move? What's the go-to move, I guess, for that?
I mean, if I were it would be a much bigger look at like, how do we build peace? How do we build understanding, right? To immediately deal with this particular situation of Hamas, how can we build up institutions within Gaza that can control and lead in Palestine, so that, because, yeah, as you mentioned, a lot of Palestinians don't support Hamas either. They just don't have a viable alternative. So how can Israel create the type of environment in which that kind of political leadership can flourish? Are they willing to do that? They're going to have to be forced by their population to understand that continuing to perpetuate this kind of violence against Palestine only makes Israelis less safe.
Okay. I guess a second question would be, because you said you work in immigration. So something that I've dug into a bit that's been kind of surprising to me, that's a little bit, we'll use the word surprising. Are you familiar, or do you have a lot of familiarity with the, is it the UNWRA or the UNRWA? I'm sorry. The part of the UN that's responsible for managing Palestinian refugees.
Is it under UNHCR or HRC?
I believe it's explicitly separate for Palestinian refugees.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. I was going to say, because there were a couple of like unique circumstances related to Palestinian refugees that I guess were a little surprising when I started to look at it more. One being that I believe the UNRWA's mandate doesn't include resettling any of the refugees, which is kind of strange. And then I think the Arab states, after I think it was Resolution 1547, they said that they explicitly would never resettle any Palestinians. So even if they're refugees there, they're never going to give them passports or citizenships. And this is like one of the reasons why the number of Palestinian refugees like balloons more and more and more every year, is because nobody's even trying to resettle them.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have any opinions, I guess, related to that, or do you not have strong?
I mean, I think that those people need the opportunity to reunite in Palestine in their ancestral homeland. Is that realistic? Is that where Israel's headed? Clearly not. But I do believe that they have that right. What does the international community do in the alternative? I mean, it's hard because I don't think those people, I don't know that do they want Jordanian citizenship and Lebanese citizenship, or do they not either? What they really want is Palestinian citizenship in Palestine. And again, until Israel is willing to budge on that, I'm not sure that like the two-state solution piece is going to come about, because that's just essential for resolving this.
Yeah.
Unless they can admit that they've been participating in colonialism and that there were bad consequences to that, and that needs to be rectified. It's hard to see it resolving.
Okay. Well, damn. Is there anything else? Is there any other part of this topic you want to tread on, or?
No, Ben, then when he was trying to tell me, okay, well, he, this and this, and I was like, Ben, I don't really think we really disagree on Israel Palestine. He's like, well, he supports Kyle Rittenhouse, and he,
Okay, hold on. Supports Kyle Rittenhouse. It's a really strong statement. I happen to believe that it was all a legitimate form of self-defense, but supports Kyle Rittenhouse is a very strong statement. But okay, go ahead.
So I suppose we could foray just a little bit into how pacifism intersects with self-defense and gun rights and that sort of area.
Sure.
Not necessary though.
Well,
again,
yeah. Did you want to? Pacifism and self-defense seem to be two things that are at ends with each other. So, yeah, I guess what is the?
Yeah, I guess my main beef with advocates of the Second Amendment is where is the well-organized militia?
Sure.
And it seems like we could be a little bit more creative given the fact that there is such an epidemic of gun violence in this country about how we leverage the intent of the Second Amendment in order to both preserve people's rights as well as preserve the safety of our country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like most people that defend the Second Amendment are principled or have they have a principled adherence to the strict fundamental nature of it, and that's where the conversation kind of starts and stops. So yeah, I kind of agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like we could have, there's already all of these gun clubs. Why isn't it required to be a part of some sort of organization or gun club that then can help police each other and supervise each other? Because then you have a smaller group of people saying, well, if Steven hauls off and shoots a bunch of people at Walmart, that's not going to look good for our club, So I guess that's sort of my thought on how you sort of marry some good sense gun control with the rights that are instilled in the Second Amendment.
Yeah, I think, like I said earlier, though, I feel like the people that have the strict adherence to it, though, don't want any of that because they're worried that if they give a little, people will ask for more. And then I think in order to pass any restrictions like that, my guess is going to be at this point, you probably need a constitutional convention because you have to start changing amendments. And yeah, there's just no shot. I don't think.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just is it really changing the amendment when the initial, the initial amendment specifically states a well-organized militia?
Well, if it's not changing the amendment, we would need a radically different Supreme Court reinterpretation of how the Supreme Court has ruled it thus far, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the things that he thinks oh, my mom's really out there on, maybe he doesn't realize that it's I also understand reality. I'm willing to be sort of audacious in my hopes and dreams. And also realistic in terms of how actual countries are run that have diverse populations, right?
Yeah. How old is your son? I'm just curious. You don't have to say exactly. I'm just curious if it's
Yeah, he's 16.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. All right.
Have you, do your kids, have they gotten to the point where they access any of your content and engage with you about news or...
No, my son is 12 and he hates my content because I'm boring. So maybe in 3 or 4 years, maybe it'll change. But yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah, I'm sorry we couldn't scream at each other. Maybe we'll find something to disagree on in the future.
No, I think Ben will be really happy just that we interacted.
Sure.
And that we do have that common ground. And thank you for being out there and being sort of a progressive voice that also brings in a lot of reason, a lot of, factual based content in order to support that, because that's really guided him in how to start tackling some of these issues.
Yeah, well, I do my best. So thanks a lot. I appreciate it. All right. Have a good night. Yeah.
Yeah, you too.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Ben. Fucking idiot. I'm just kidding. Damn, Ben made it sound like me and his mom were gonna throw down. Okay, I think I can chat with X for a bit, but cancel your shit. Excuse me, better. What? Cancel my sickness? Cancel my sore throat? Drink tea with honey. I had 2 honey cough drops. Okay, fuck you. Join your channel. He's looking. I messaged him on Discord. Is he really gonna join my public channel? What could possibly go wrong? Operation Red Wings. The fuck is this?